Welcome to the Appendix N chat, which is where I discuss books that are mentioned in Appendix N of Gary Gygax's first edition AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide as inspirations for D&D, when we talk about in what way these books inspired D&D. This is going to be about the Pellucidar books, the Hollow World books of Edgar Rice Burroughs, also author of John Carter of Mars books and Tarzan, most famously. I've talked about Barsoom, Mars and Amtor, Venus series by this guy before on this channel, and this time this is the Hollow World, which is a fun thing, by the way, just that all this is in a shared universe. There is the Venus books explicitly re-adept into them Pellucidar, this one, Tarzan and Mars, and Tarzan and Pellucidar cross over directly in one novel, like Tarzan goes to Pellucidar. So this is a really early shared universe, fairly light shared universe, I should say, but nonetheless, all this stuff, this kind of pulp fiction happens in the same world, and a lot of it's sword and planet, but it also has jungle adventures, and here it has sort of both the hollow world. Inside the world, there is a world, you go onto the inside and there's another world on the inside around the Earth's core, which is acting as a sun to that world, and it's also a Stone Age environment. There are fewer really obvious direct inspirations than in particularly Barsoom, and Barsoom is one of the obvious ones for a bunch of things we can tell. There, these 3 or 4 elements are directly drawn from these books by Gygax himself. But here there's slightly fewer, but one, there is the MetaThing, the broad sense of adventure in strange worlds, and that in the sense of adventure fiction in strange worlds, which is not all sci-fi and fantasy. Most sci-fi and fantasy, in fact, by the 70s was not straight adventure in a strange world. Gygax really heavily favoured those books that were. And in this case, this is sort of nominally sci-fi, I guess, but it's very much fantasy adventure, functionally, like Sword and Planet is often. In this, you have people go into the inner world using a boring mole, big machine, and they adventure, and there's reptile men and gorilla men, and it's always day, apart from under this weird pseudo moon in one small area of the world. It's a strange place, which leans heavily into Lost World tropes. And so the most obvious thing, and it's not the only source for this, but it is one of the chief sources, along with I guess Tarzan does have a bit of this too. But think about the first edition monster manual having a whole section on dinosaurs, a weirdly large section on dinosaurs, and you see that it's expanded in other resources later. So dinosaurs, just the fact there are dinosaurs in this, the leady, for instance, is a diplodocus. We're told, but at least that is Perry, one of the main characters' views. It's also the general idea of the Stone Age savage environment, which you do get from very early on in Greyhawk, and we'll talk about it in Mistara. We'll talk about Mistara a bit more in a second, but in Mistara, from very early on. It's not really something so much that Gary trades on heavily in terms of his modules. When you think about it, like, he has I cannot think of any straight traditional caveman jungle module. You've got Isle of the Ape, which has a jungle island, but it's not really that kind of module. It's more something that happens very early on in TSR, including in some contexts while Gary's still in the company, before 1985, but by other people who are drawing on the same sources. And so dinosaurs are an obvious one, but then say, and it's also that it crosses over in terms of the rotting jungle stuff. The kind of more the more dark, grim jungle stuff is perhaps more Conanish, so Hidden Shrine of Tamoa-chan, or things like that. That's perhaps more in that direction, more Conan-esque. Whereas here, I think what we'd look to instead is something like X1 Isle of Dread, by Cook and Moldvay, which starts the world of Mistara. But Isle of Dread, and there are a few other modules like this early on, but Isle of Dread is a very good module, is an island there's various zones, there's various kind of things to do, but there's all kinds of strange fauna, including prehistoric fauna, primitive human beings, visitors from outside that area, kind of hiding out in it, and in this Burroughs certainly does also have lost temples, so eventually lost temples. And so, yeah, I think you see a really obvious inspiration being that. And there's a bit of it in I, One Dwellers of the Forbidden City, though, again, that maybe leans more on the darker pulp. Pulp is a spectrum, and Conan is at the bloody and corrupt side of it, whereas Burroughs has a rather sunnier view, even on the bad guys often. The development of that, when I say, okay, so we've got dinosaurs, and then we have, and Gygax is into dinosaurs, and then we have modules like X1, is that Mistara eventually receives, I think it first mentioned in 86, I don't know, something like that, or so possibly after Gary's left, but certainly there's box sets into the 90s of Hollow World. The inside of Mistara is a Hollow World like Pellucidar, so that's a simple one. Again, that's post-Gygax, but it's drawing on the same sources from very early on. And in connection to Mistara, again, this is 1986, the Creature Catalogue by Jim Bambra et al. Has the Megatherium, the giant sloth, who is a creature from you see at the Earth's core, the giant sloth, as a potential foe, and that's a Beckme product from 1986. So you have a number of both environmental stuff, just the kind of adventure fiction that is very clearly big in Gary's mind when he's creating the base classes and the base experience of dungeon crawling, but also we have some specifics, certainly dinosaurs for Gary, and then jungle tribe adventures and the Hollow World and the giant sloth in the very early, late Gary, early post-Gary period. I can't think of any others. If you can think of any others, please tell me in the comments any other inspirations drawn from these books, and I will see you next time.